Hey guys, in this week's Casually Criterion episode, we are going to review Akira Kurosawa's High and Low. But before we do that, we'll also be talking about House of the Dragon Season 1 wrap-up, WALL-E coming to the Criterion Collection and what that means, as well as the entire first season of Tales of the Jedi that just hit Disney. So, join us!
Welcome to the Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinks. My name is Justin, and with me is a man who loves a good, quality, well-built shoe. Mike, how you doing?
Doing good, sir. I am just admiring my well-built shoes. Thank you for saying that about me.
Yeah.
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm a man who goes for a cheap shoe. Like probably 75 to 80% of the shoes I've ever had in my life, I've bought at like Ross or a thrift store.
Yeah. I, for a long time, went with in high school, I was like a big Converse Vans kind of guy, and those don't last very long. Although they are expensive and not cheap now.
They are now, yeah. I think at the time, they became popular because they were the cheap, like punky shoe to wear.
Yeah, like before Nike bought Converse, they were like $30 for a good pair of Chuck Taylors, you know?
Mm-hmm. I couldn't get into them. They hurt my feet.
Yeah?
Even though they were cheap. And looked cool.
You have sensitive feet, I guess.
Apparently.
Yeah. All right. If this is your first time listening, this is a Casually Criterion episode, which we like to do every other episode where we review a film from, you guessed it, the Criterion Collection. Usually those are voted on by the listeners via our Twitter page. Before we get into the main review, we'll be doing our usual News on the March, where we talk about what we've been watching, whatever news is going on, whatever we want to talk about, really. So if you haven't seen the main movie, you can still listen. And then we'll move into the Casually Criterion review for High and Low, spine number 24.
That's right. And as Mike said, we put the poll for our Criterion films up on our Twitter page, so you can follow us there at Casual Cinecast. You can send us a message to that account or to casualcinemedia@gmail.com. And then, of course, if you haven't done so already, you like the show, you want to help other people find it, or just let us know that you like it, leave us a review on iTunes, wherever. 5 stars, 10 stars, whatever.
Yeah. But if you don't like us and you want to leave a 1 star, then just don't do that. Just forget we exist.
Yeah. It's probably not worth your time at that point.
Yeah. All right. And with that, I say we get into it.
Let's march on to the news.
Yes.
News on the march!
Okay, Mike. Kick us off with your first item, a show that's recently wrapped up its season 1. And I think you're the only one who's seen it, so naturally, you're going to start us off.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I'm not the only one who's seen it. Lots of people have seen it.
Yeah, not in the world. I didn't.
It was HBO's biggest finale since the end of Game of Thrones, if you can believe such a thing.
I'm sure.
And that, of course, I'm talking about the House of the Dragon Season 1, just wrapped up. I know Chris has seen this, and it feels wrong to talk about it without him. But that's what I've been watching, so that's what I got to talk about. So I don't know I don't have to tell him. Sorry, Chris.
Sad. I could pretend to be Chris.
Yeah, you could. But I doubt you'd have his enthusiasm, since you did not even make it through season 1 of the show.
Or his knowledge of the show itself.
Yeah. But anyways, so House of the Dragon Season 1 just wrapped up. Chris and I have been talking about this through text messages and our Discord and other places. So I know how he feels about it, but I won't speak too much for him, other than to say I think he and I both liked it quite a bit. When this thing started, we were a little gun shy, I guess, because I don't know if you have ever heard of the show called Game of Thrones, but it ruled the world in pop culture for almost a decade. And then when it ended, people were underwhelmed, to say the least, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
And so, no one really knew what to expect, I think, with House of the Dragon. And man, this show just kind of hit the ground running, and it just filled this void that I think a lot of people had been missing since 2018, 2019, whenever season 8 of Game of Thrones ended. And yeah, it feels good to be back in this world, I guess, this universe where the lore is so interesting and the world building is so expertly done. And it's fantasy for adults, you know? A lot of fantasy and popular culture has always just sort of veered towards like everyone, like Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or you name it, right? It has to be marketable to children to make money. And then you have this rare bird of George R. R. Martin's world, of Westeros, A Song of Ice and Fire, whatever you want to call it, that just is so high budget, high quality, and just like ridiculously kind of pulpy, fun stories to get into. I mean, here you're dealing with violence and incest and double crosses and politicking and all the stuff that just makes for a fun drama, you know? And add that with like HBO's just like massive budget and the fact that anything that comes on HBO is just going to be higher quality than something like Netflix or Amazon. I don't know why that is, but it just is, you know?
Yeah.
And anyways, all I can say is the show wrapped up very satisfying. I'm excited to see where it goes. This was kind of a strange season of television because it spans the course of 20 years within 10 episodes.
Right.
And so you'll see, you know, some characters get recast, and then all of a sudden, halfway through the season, they're having babies. And then by the end of the season, those babies have grown up and getting everything, all the chess pieces on the board right to where they need to be for season 2 to really hit the ground running. And yeah, I mean, the show just delivered. It was a high quality season of television. It's not perfect, I don't think. I have some problems with it. I wish maybe the pacing could have slowed down a little bit. But given that I kind of have read the source material and I know where it's going, I kind of understand also why they just needed to get to this point where they're at now, where the season ends. And so we can prepare for the chaos that is about to happen for the next 2 or 3 seasons of the show. But yeah, I'll just kind of keep it brief because, like you said, you haven't seen it, and I have no one to really bounce this off of. But let me just say, dear listener, if you ever liked Game of Thrones and then still feel burned by it, and you haven't decided to watch House of the Dragon for whatever reason, whether it be too painful or disinterested, or you're worried about the quality of it, I can tell you that if you liked Game of Thrones, you will like House of the Dragon, most likely. I can't imagine not liking it.
Right.
Not liking it if you watched Game of Thrones and liked that. That's what I mean.
Yeah. How do you think it compares, like your hype after season 1 is done about the show and how much you enjoyed it? Like, how does that compare with your thoughts and how you were left with, you know, when I guess season 1 of Game of Thrones was over?
So when season 1 of Game of Thrones hit, I pretty much I didn't see it live, nor had I read the books at that point. I was actually in a Walmart in Nacogdoches, Texas. And I was looking for something to do, like a video game or whatever. And they actually had season 1 of Game of Thrones on sale for $30. And I was like, that's really cheap for an HBO show. And I recognized Sean Bean. And I was like, all right, I will watch this. But I didn't buy it. Instead, I went to Hastings when those existed, and I rented it. And yeah, I was pretty much hooked by the end of season 1 of Game of Thrones. I'd never seen a show do anything like that before, where spoilers for Game of Thrones, and I'll be vague, but a character that you thought was indispensable dies at almost the very end of season 1 of Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
And it pulls the rug out from under you in a way that I have never seen a TV show do before, where they kill one of their top billed stars, you know?
Right.
And then you're like, well, where can the story go after this? He was our guy, you know? And then, you know, after that, I started getting into the books and all that stuff, and it was pretty fun. But the way House of the Dragon compares is it's a different kind of beast because it's not based on novels. It's actually based on 4 chapters of a fake history book from in the universe, right? And that history book is basically like a recounting of the events that take place during the show, but years later by people like 30, 40, 50 years removed from when the events actually took place, and there was no history recorded. So it's all like a game of telephone, right? That's kind of the gimmick of the book. So the whole idea is that much like the further back in history you go in our real world, the less accurate things are going to be and the more assumptions that are made and the more unreliable narrator concept kind of creeps in. So they have a lot of room to wiggle in House of the Dragon, where if something happens on the page in the book of Fire and Blood and it says like so-and-so called so-and-so a whore and, you know, executed them in the hallway or whatever, it can play out a little differently in the show, a little bit more nuance, a little less to the point, you know?
Yeah.
So and you can add a bunch of nuances and stuff there. So I think they did that with great success in House of the Dragon Season 1. It actually surpassed what I was expecting because Fire and Blood, although I've read it, a lot of the stories, if they adapt them like this, could make great TV shows. If they adapt them exactly like they are on the page, it would be cartoonish and strange. Because history is written by the victors, you know? Right. So a lot of characters just feel kind of one-sided and everything. So anyways, I think they rose to the occasion. The cast is insane in here. Olivia Cooke, who you know from lots of stuff, is in this. And God, she is so good. Mm-hmm. Then you also have people like Matt Smith from Doctor Who and The Crown and other things. And then Paddy Considine. I'm not sure how you say his last name, but he's from a lot of stuff too. I think most notably Hot Fuzz. He's one of the Andes.
Yes, that's what I know him from.
Yeah. I'd actually saw a movie that he wrote and directed a long time ago called Tyrannosaur, which was super good. It's got, help me, Olivia, she won an Academy Award recently.
Oh, Olivia
She's
Colman.
From The Lost Daughter.
Olivia Colman, who's also in Hot Fuzz.
Yeah, it's got Olivia Colman in it, and also the guy who plays Sid from Children of Men.
Oh, I like
Good movie. Yeah. But anyway, point is, long story short, House of the Dragon, it's great. I don't like it as much as I liked Season 1 of Game of Thrones, to answer your question. But I like it a lot. I like it better than half the seasons of Game of Thrones that exist. So
yeah. I think the question was more like measuring your hype. Like, do you feel like you did when you had Game of Thrones on TV and more was coming, you know?
Yeah, it feels like an event. It feels like, as someone who's into podcasts like me, I like to listen to TV show recap podcasts. I like to, I don't know, break down Easter eggs and lore and things like that. I can tell you that if you're into that kind of thing, there's no other show that can compete with Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, that world. The amount of high quality podcasters and high quality like outlets that dedicate their time to breaking down this world and really dissecting the history and the characters and the motivations and all that stuff. If you're into that like TV recap culture, you almost have to watch this show. Like there's just nothing else that competes. No other show brings out this like high quality of recap and discussion every week. I've missed it. There's been a big void in my life since Game of Thrones went away and pop culture decided to hate it all of a sudden.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man.
But anyway, the hype is there. I'm sad that season 2 likely won't even hit until 2024, but it is what it is.
This means it'll probably be better for
Hopefully. It'll be more satisfying when it finally gets here. But anyway, I know Chris has some thoughts on it, so I'm sure he'll probably talk about it, and we may talk about it in more detail down the road. I don't know. But that's about all I can really say on a one-sided conversation about House of the Dragon, or as it's been lovingly referred to as Hot D. season 1.
Yeah, which is my favorite thing about the show.
Yeah.
I have seen, I think, 4.5 episodes.
Yeah.
So I'm not completely in the dark, but I feel like with, as you said, the amount of time that the show spans, I'm not sure I could really, or I feel like so much more has probably happened since I dropped out.
Oh, yes. I know Chris has implored you to, because I recorded the episode where I heard him talk about it to you in the sidelines, but you really should just finish out the season. Just to say you did. Because it does go different places than I think that you might expect.
Yeah. Well, if I have a lull and other things to watch and just sitting around with nothing to do,
yeah,
perhaps I'll pick it back up.
Perhaps.
I'll keep it.
Okay,
I'll keep it
anyway,
in my mind.
What'd you say?
I'll keep it in my mind.
Okay, that's all we can ask.
Yeah.
All right. Beyond that, we have a little bit of news, not recent news, but relatively recently, since we've talked about Criterion Collection news, and since this is a casually Criterion episode, what better time?
Yes.
So why don't you kick us off on our next topic and why we thought it would be interesting to discuss here and now?
Well, I guess we're discussing it here and now because, like you said, this is our first Criterion episode, or where we've talked a lot about Criterion since the announcement was made, but it was a announcement of a newer film that kind of came on its own, an announcement by itself, which was weird. They don't normally do that. Normally they announce, an entire month slate of releases, right? So the January 2023 releases will all drop at once. And then this announcement came out, and when I first saw it, I thought it was a joke. Because it came out on its own. They've done it.
I thought
before.
to myself, that will never happen. What a funny, wishful thinking kind of joke.
Yeah, what a funny bit, right? And
yeah,
they've done it before for like April Fools, right?
Sure.
Announced some dumb movie that they're putting out, but of course, without further ado, they announced that they were releasing Pixar's WALL-E on Criterion, spine number 1161.
Ooh.
And it'll be in 4K and Blu-ray. Doesn't look like it's available in DVD, actually. That's interesting.
Yeah, why would you want it on DVD? Like, they should just stop dedicating any time to DVDs.
Probably. I would agree with that, I think. But, so I think part of the big news is obviously Criterion releasing something Disney and Pixar related. That's a really big company that could do their own release of it. And then I think the other part is there's just not a lot of animation on Criterion in general.
Yeah, a shockingly small amount. You would think there would be more, but
off the top of my head, there's like Watership Down, Fantastic Mr. Fox, if you want to count that.
I would.
Yeah, and there's one called Jellyfish Eyes, which I haven't seen, but I think that's not entirely animated.
Okay,
but I could be wrong. I haven't seen that one.
Nor have I.
Okay, so this is really I guess the third or fourth animated film.
Sure, but still, there's not many.
Yeah.
And I guess what I would say, what makes this big news is, obviously WALL-E, I think is a good movie, a very good movie. Mm-hmm. I like it quite a bit. How do you feel about WALL-E?
I think WALL-E's great. It's one of my favorite Pixar movies. The first half to me is just pure perfection when it comes to animated films, and maybe films in general. It doesn't quite stay at that height, but it doesn't drop so far down that it
doesn't squander the height
movie.
either.
Yeah. It's just like perfection followed by stuff that's still pretty good, in my opinion. So I enjoy it.
Yeah. I agree. Solid Pixar movie. Not my favorite Pixar movie. Not the one I would have wanted Criterion to release. But what I think newsworthy about this is, what sort of precedent does this set? Because if Disney is allowing something like this to exist on a third party company like Criterion, what's next? Could we get other Pixar movies, other Disney animated movies. You know, like Disney animation is, I mean, those are important films, right? Like that's Criterion's whole thing, is like, even if you don't like the films or you find them disgusting or whatever, everything offered in the collection has some sort of value to it.
Yeah.
You know? And so this is, I sometimes I forgot, you know, this was even happening. But then when you start to really think about like, what does this mean for the future of Criterion? That is exciting, especially because Disney is starting to own everything now.
Yeah. And maybe some of that excitement is put off. There was other news, I think it was this week, that Criterion had laid off some of its staff. I think it was like 10% or something, you know?
Yeah.
Which doesn't necessarily bode well, but I think having access to things like Wall-E, some sort of partnership like that, you know, they
bring in some money. Yeah.
They put out those big titles every now and then, and I'm sure it makes them money and keeps the lights on more significantly than something, you know, something that most people haven't heard of.
Yeah, it was made like 3 decades before most people were born who would be buying it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'm hoping that we get, I don't know. I mean, do you think that they would release something like Toy Story?
Toy Story, yes. I'm
what
doubtful
about Toy Story 2?
I feel like they either wouldn't dip into the sequels or they just do a box set.
Yeah. But then again,
and call it done. Like
who wants
maybe
Toy
just
Story
a trilogy.
4 on Criterion? I don't.
No. I don't
want Toy Story 4 to exist at all.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, you know, like what Pixar movies, like, if you have 3 or however many you want to name, I guess, would you be hyped to see on Criterion?
Ooh, let's see. I would be, well, I mean, like, I like Wall-E quite a bit too. It's not in my top 3 Pixar movies, but probably my top 5. I would like to see Toy Story. I would like to see Up. I would like to see Incredibles.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would like just I know this exists in other formats, but I would like a Criterion with like the special features and all that of all the little shorts that exist before each movie.
Right.
At this point, it's got to be like, what? Like, there's got to be like 40 of those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. They do have a self-contained release for the Pixar shorts, or at least the ones that were out at the time that they did that. But
I'd like a 4K version on Criterion with commentaries and booklets and artwork and all that kinds of stuff, you know? What about you? Totally. I mean, what would you like to see Disney / Pixar release next for Criterion?
I mean, I think Toy Story is the obvious one when you really hyper focus on the...
It's the most important one.
Yeah, the most important. And I think bigger picture, maybe animation has been so scarce on Criterion because Disney is probably one of the most important animation companies out there when it comes to like films.
I don't think anyone could dispute that.
Disney and Pixar. So when you're trying to release the most important stuff, that it probably makes it difficult if you can't touch any of their stuff. So,
well, sure. I mean, do you think we're also going to get like Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, or like the classics, you know, like Beauty and the Beast?
Yeah. So that's kind of where I was going. Yeah, exactly. Was that like, I think there are really important ones that go beyond Pixar that I think would be higher up my priority list. You know, I think that one.
Oh, Sleeping Beauty is what I was trying to think of. Beauty and the Beast. That's an important one too, though. Beauty and the Beast, to be fair.
Sleeping
Beauty.
I
was thinking like
Jungle
the really
Book.
old ones. Yeah, Jungle Book would be cool.
But
I mean, the possibilities are endless. There's a million classic animated movies from Disney.
Right. And as far as Pixar goes, I think the ones that you said, Toy Story is obviously the most important, but I think if you were to go into artistically speaking, you know, in terms of quality of film, not that the Toy Story isn't necessarily on that, but I feel like Soul is probably the one I would like to see next because it feels
I forget about Soul.
Yeah, I really liked it a lot. And it feels
it's solid.
it feels most akin to other Criterion things in both being a little bit more artistic and abstract and doing something, I think, different with animation.
Sure.
Not with animation style necessarily, but in terms of, a story about, an aging, aspiring jazz musician who's kind of past it and about to miss his opportunity to live out his dreams. And like, that's different even from something like Toy Story that is really inherently entertaining for kids, or even as much as I probably like Up better than Soul. Up is still has a lot of that stuff that like is inherently entertaining, and I guess Soul has it too in places, but just like as a base story, it doesn't feel like a kid's animated movie when you describe it.
Soul feels like a movie that could only be made from a studio that has a lot of trust put into it.
Yeah. So that's probably the only one I think that I would add. And to clarify, I have not seen Inside Out. I think that's the other one that's a bit in that Soul type of world.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of
little heady, little artistic.
Yeah. But I don't know. I think I'm excited. Once I realized it was a real announcement, my brain started going wild with stuff that it means, and and the possibilities. Like it makes it feel like a lot more is possible, even beyond animation. I think that the meme about Criterion releasing popular things is like Armageddon and The Rock.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not necessarily going to those places, but just,
well, I mean, like I said, Disney owns like most of everything now. So if Disney is open to cutting deals with Criterion, that allows Fox stuff, who knows what else, like Fox Searchlight, like indies that weren't allowed before.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah,
exactly.
I mean, we could get contemporary directors who aren't Wes Anderson releasing their films directly to Criterion.
That's true. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
I'm for that. But yeah, I don't think I have anything else on this release announcement. I just thought it was exciting.
Yeah, the possibilities are endless.
Okay. So moving on?
Yeah, why not? Okay, so the next thing we have to talk about is something that dropped this week. It's an animated Star Wars show called Tales of the Jedi. There are 6 episodes, and all of them are about 15, 16 minutes or under, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Sounds right.
So the whole season's about an hour, roughly, I would say.
Hour and a half, almost.
Yeah. And, yeah, I mean, if you're not into Star Wars, you could probably just skip ahead to the the high and low review.
Yeah, if you aren't into Star Wars,
this is
I
not
think
for you.
On a level that goes beyond even like the saga films, then this show might not be for you.
But then again, it also might, because I think it's more accessible than starting something like the Clone Wars.
True.
Like, it's newer, it's sleeker looking, it's to the point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, let's put it this way. If you watched the Star Wars prequel trilogy and you were like, there's a lot of odd storytelling choices here. What's going on? Why is there a guy named Dooku all of a sudden? Like, what's he all about? This cartoon would like flesh out that for you.
Yeah. I guess it kind of fills in some gaps between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. But I do feel like the story and the characters in Tales of the Jedi would have much less weight if you were watching it on its own without having seen Clone Wars.
I agree. Well, there's 3 episodes that I think would work without having seen Clone Wars, and there's 3 episodes that I think would be completely mystifying to you if you had not seen the Clone Wars.
Yeah,
so,
that's fair.
3 episodes about this character named Ahsoka Tano, which she was introduced in the Clone Wars cartoon and exists as a Padawan to Anakin Skywalker to kind of help bridge his fall to being Darth Vader. You get to see about where she was born, how they discovered she was Force sensitive, and then what happens at the end of Clone Wars and right after.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also the Dooku stuff, which is like Christopher Lee's character from the prequel trilogy. You kind of see his backstory about having used to been a Jedi and then why he fell, or part of why he fell.
Yeah.
But anyway, I liked it. It's not necessary, but it's one of those things where, like, now that I know a little piece of the puzzle, it feels good. Like Phantom Menace will feel less strange to me now, because now I know what this character that showed up in episode 2 was doing during episode 1, and what his relationship was to Qui-Gon Jinn, which was Liam Neeson's character, and so on. And also it shows him start the process of like deleting information from the Jedi archives about and hiding planets and stuff like that come up in episode 2 that have almost no explanation whatsoever to why it's happening in that strange movie.
Yeah.
But anyway, what'd you take from all this? Like, what was your standout of Tales of the Jedi season 1?
Well, I think the animation is better to me. Does this animation feel better to you than like Clone Wars or Rebels?
Yes, it feels better than Rebels. It feels better than the first 6 seasons of Clone Wars. It feels about the same as season 7 of Clone Wars and season 1 of Bad Batch.
Yeah, that's probably
quality
fair.
Wise.
That's probably fair. That's not necessarily the standout. That's one of the things that I really enjoyed the way the show looks. I thought the animation was really good.
Yeah.
And pretty a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, the bulk of the animation you've seen has been without the Disney budget on Cartoon Network, Cartoon Network budget from like 2008.
Mm-hmm.
So like the Clone Wars was it's kind of rough for like the first maybe 3 or 4 seasons. Not rough. It's not badly animated. It's just simple.
Yeah, it's simple, and it feels like, they didn't throw everything they had into the show for sure.
Yeah,
like budget wise. But to like stand out, I think there's an episode with Ahsoka Tano where she's doing a training exercise, and Anakin is like, "No, that training exercise is too easy. Go do this harder one."
Yeah.
And it's a pretty good episode, but I really enjoyed the way it ends, particularly.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay. Cause I remember the particular part, like the scene that it ends is referencing an episode of Clone Wars.
An important episode of Clone Wars.
Yeah. A huge one. Like probably the best.
The biggest
sort
episode of Clone Wars, possibly.
Yeah. So,
I like how it added more context to that.
It ends like of her walking into a scene that was a big deal in Clone Wars, and to like just how cool that was to have that episode end there, and and us see, kind of, I guess, not that it needed much explaining, but kind of show us
why she survived.
How she was able to
do what she did.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool.
It was a question we didn't need answered, but it's cool that they answered it.
Yeah. And the Dooku stuff, to your point, feels a little bit more necessary to have answered.
I would say so, honestly. Like, I would say if you're ever going to watch the prequel trilogy again, like if you ever, listener, get a wild hair to go back and try to give the Star Wars prequels another chance, I would say watch the Count Dooku episodes of this first. Or watch like 2 of them, then watch Phantom Menace, and then watch the 3rd Count Dooku episode, or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how the time. I'd have to think about it more. But I did just watch all of these last night. Like that's one of the cool things that I enjoyed, is while they're kind of separate, they go in chronological order, and you can sit and kind of watch them in one sitting, really, if you want. It's a bit like watching a movie, but just an episodic one.
Sure, yeah. There are... Well, like, okay, so like, yeah, the first 3 of these episodes take place before episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And then I think the 4th one takes place during the Phantom Menace. And then the second 2, like, take place during the Clone Wars and then take place after episode 3 ends. So they span throughout the entire prequel trilogy so far.
Mm-hmm.
But what I think is the most exciting thing about this show is it's sort of such a vague concept, Tales of the Jedi, and they're just little shorts, that who knows what season 2 could bring us. What Jedis they could focus on next,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's fun to just get these little extra one-off stories, I think. That just, well, I was going to say they don't necessarily change a whole lot. They just kind of fill out detail. And although I hesitate to say that because there is a bit of backlash against this show.
Is there? Oh, I've heard that there's some people who are really into the novels who haven't quite reconciled some of the differences in storytelling. That's what I've heard. Is that what you are referencing?
Yeah. To be, I guess, specific is there are really similar moments and stories in the shows that are in the novels, particularly with Ahsoka, and they have changed some of the characters' ethnicities and sexual orientations.
Have they?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Is that some of the people in Ahsoka stories, a character was black, or two characters were black, and they were an LGBTQ sexual orientation. I'm not sure which one because I don't know the details.
But in the book, but not in the show, right?
In the book, yes. And in the show, they changed it to a white person. And I guess I can't imagine, not to my recollection, did they touch on the sexual orientation of the character.
Yeah, but I don't think that was referenced at all that I caught.
But I guess the point being, if they changed that, they probably just didn't address it intentionally. Which, I mean, they're 12 to 15 minute episodes, so we don't really have time to go into characters who don't matter orientation necessarily. But I can understand, it feels like they're kind of changing things that were
important to some people,
inclusive and representational of minorities, and that kind of sucks, and I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to that because I have not read the book that in question. I will say that there's a little bit of that in the Count Dooku episode, but it all still makes sense. Like it's just like they don't touch on just enough to where the Count Dooku stuff still fits pretty well.
Yeah, but I've heard that his is generally pretty okay. Like they're not messing up canon.
Yeah, so here's the thing. The novel that Ahsoka Tano, the changes you're talking about, that was actually based on 4-episode arc of the Clone Wars that was written but didn't get to get made after Cartoon Network canceled it. So it was adapted into a novel. And it was approved by Dave Filoni, who is like George Lucas's apprentice. Most people accept what Dave Filoni puts out into Star Wars as like the closest thing to George Lucas Star Wars as you're going to get. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's tough, especially if it's like getting rid of representation. I can certainly understand how a lot of that matters to people, and that's important to some people. But when you have like a multimedia franchise like this that exists over video games and comics and books and cartoons and movies and live action TV shows, it's not often. I think typically Disney has done like almost an unprecedented job of keeping everything canon and making sense and gel together. But I don't know. All I can say is Ahsoka Tano is Dave Filoni's baby. That's like his character. Yeah. And though I've never read this book, and I understand the book's important to a lot of people, I would rather him do the vision that he has in animated form.
Yeah.
But that said, I completely understand where anyone would be coming from, even if it's not something that bothers me per se. Because I think a lot of the events still, like on paper, like if you squint, work out the same way. Yeah. It's just little minor details that get changed like that. But, to a lot of people, changing someone's race or sexual orientation is not a minor detail.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, all in all, I would say if you like Star Wars, or if you want to get into Star Wars animation or the extended universe, Tales of the Jedi is a good place to get started.
Yeah, it's good. It's less daunting than Clone Wars, which is 130 something episodes, I think.
It's long.
Yeah. I just finished it recently, and it took me the better part of a year.
Yeah. How many episodes do you watch a night? Like 1 or 2?
Yeah, 1 or 2, I would say.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm not binging it hard or anything like that, because I almost never do that.
Sure.
But one or two a night, yeah, and not every night. But I guess probably not most nights either. But yeah,
you made it through, and you're on the other side now.
Mm-hmm. And I think it enhanced my appreciation of this show. Like if I'd watched this show first, I'm not sure I would have enjoyed it as much as I did.
Sure. And let me ask you this: as someone who's not, you don't watch the prequels that often, did going through the Clone Wars help you look at that arc and that trilogy a different way, or does it just kind of exist separately in your brain?
No, it doesn't exist separately. I really, despite the difference between animation and live action, I really actively consider them the same thing and think about them to where they affect each other. And I did, immediately upon finishing Clone Wars, I watched Revenge of the Sith again, episode 3, and I enjoyed it more than I ever remember enjoying it before.
Yeah.
So it does make me want to go back and revisit the rest of the prequels, especially I think this show, Tales of the Jedi, will help that even more.
It'll certainly help with the first one, I think.
Yeah.
Phantom Menace.
Probably. And Lord knows episode 2 needs all the help it can get.
God, it does. It really does. As someone who likes Star Wars more than most people, I just do not like that movie. That's the only Star Wars movie that I just absolutely cannot budge on saying it is not a good movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Right,
I don't think you're alone.
I think we spent enough time on Star Wars. What do you think?
Probably.
All right, let's get into the Casually Criterion review for High and Low, starting now.
All right, so as always with our Criterion films, we will not be doing our usual spoiler-free section up front like we do for our newer films. So we're going to jump straight into talking about High and Low and our thoughts on it. And we could say a spoiler from the word go. So if you have not seen Akira Kurosawa's High and Low, pause the podcast.
Get out of here.
Go watch the film. Get out of here, but come back once you've seen it. But yeah, that's it. That's your warning. There it is.
Yeah, that was it. All right. High and Low was directed by Akira Kurosawa. It stars Toshiro Mifune, Yutaka Sada, and Tatsuya Nakadai. That's my best.
Yeah.
That's my best shot at that. No disrespect intended if I pronounced some of those wrong.
Yeah, I mean, we're Americans from Texas, so, you know.
We do what we can.
Grain of salt. I have a coworker who speaks a lot of Chinese and Japanese, and I was talking about Kurosawa and Mifune, and he laughed at my pronunciation. So I will tell you, we are saying them wrong.
Oh yeah, well I'm sure, but I've been saying them wrong for so long. I don't know how to change.
Yeah. I think we get the Americanized version of them right.
Sure. I mean, I think that's how Americans commonly say them. I don't think we're alone in that.
No.
Anyways, the IMDb synopsis for this movie says an executive of Yokohama Shoe Company becomes a victim of extortion when his chauffeur's son is kidnapped by mistake and held for ransom.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, good synopsis, accurate.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
So, sir, who wants to get us started? Do you want to kick us off, or do you want me to do it?
I can kick us off, I think.
All right.
It's Chris's movie. Chris chose it, and he unfortunately can't be with us. He's under the weather, but we had to get this episode out because it's been a while. So I don't know. I would normally go with him, but this is a movie that I have seen one other time, I think, in my life. I don't think I ever saw it a second time, although it did feel pretty familiar. So I think I remembered it better than I thought I did going in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I remember watching this movie because it seemed sort of like a novelty for Kurosawa, because to that point, I had just kind of devoured Kurosawa's samurai films. And then it seemed like weird to me that he made this movie that was, you know, modern day for its time. This sort of thriller, I guess. To call it a thriller? I don't really know. It's not particularly thrilling.
I mean,
drama, I guess, is probably
drama. Yeah, sure. I mean, there's thrilling elements of it.
Yeah,
but like in a very like clinical, like David Fincher kind of way. Like, is Zodiac a thriller? Not really.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of similarities between Zodiac and David Fincher. At least like more recent Fincher, I guess.
Yeah, like Zodiac and an onward Fincher.
Yeah. But yeah, so it was kind of this novelty movie, and I think that colored my perception of it at the time. You know, it's kind of like, how does a guy who makes samurai movies make this crime drama movie?
Yeah, guys can't do two things. We know that.
Yeah, right. So watching it this time, I think I was kind of surprised by how much more there was to the movie, like theme wise, you know, like how much it has in common, I think thematically, with something like Parasite. And maybe it's, you know, Parasite existing and having had conversations about that and putting that theme into my brain that, you know, that made it so apparent watching High and Low this time that it has those sort of class division themes. And, all through it, like in the title. Yeah, I did not know what the title meant forever until I was watching it this time. I was like, okay,
I assume it's a double whammy of, you can search High and Low, and also the class divide.
Yeah, because I mean his house, Toshiro Mifune's house, the executive, is up on a hill, right?
High,
and can kind of be seen. It's high, if you will.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyways, even the title became like sort of clear to me watching it this time, even though I'd seen the movie before and I remembered most of the story and kind of everything that happens. And I mean, beyond that, this movie I think is just really, really well shot. I love some of the wider shots that they have in the apartment were just kind of striking to me and really interesting, because there's shots where all of these extra policemen that are in and kind of helping do things, sometimes they're laid out almost like a painting, where they're kind of all three looking in different directions.
Well, and each one of them looking in a certain direction means a different thing for like what they're thinking. And a lot of times it's not even policemen. It's like you'll have like the wife hanging out, the chauffeur whose son is kidnapped hanging out, and then you'll have like one of his businessmen friends hanging out too. And each of them are like wanting something different from this phone call, you know, and they're all, the way they're blocked and organized in the frame is just really intentional. And
they're all in there in one spot. And it doesn't necessarily feel natural. It feels crafted and in a way that's like really interesting to look at. And I kind of, I don't know, it's kind of fascinated watching that, and especially the way that he keeps things interesting, because the whole first half of this movie takes place pretty much in the apartment. I don't think we leave.
Yeah, for like an hour, we're like in that room.
Yeah. And yeah, I thought that was cool. But I think this movie's really entertaining. You know, I thought I remember hearing someone recently say, you know, the movie is great for like an hour and then it kind of becomes police procedural. I can't remember who said that or where I heard it. And the sentiment was kind of that it's still good, but it's not as good. And I can kind of understand that to an extent, because there's something that's contagious, I guess, about watching like a master of their craft like Kurosawa spend an hour in an apartment, and how well that's done is like really impressive. But watching all the police stuff, once we get with them, the way the movie was unfolding, like it just felt very modern. It felt like I could understand how people might see an old black and white movie and maybe like they'd get a little bored in the first half. But once we get into the police stuff, like this movie feels like it just flies and it moves and it has the pace of like a modern movie. Like my wife loves Zodiac, and I was like, once that started, I was like, I think she would really like this movie if she was sat down to watch it and made it through the first hour, you know? So it's really impressive to me, even when that gets going. I liked it a lot. And yeah, I'm a big fan. I've probably been talking long enough about my general thoughts. All the performances are great. There's very little score in the movie. There's a couple of choice moments. I'm sure we'll talk about that maybe. But yeah, I'm a huge fan. This rewatch like vastly brought up my opinion of this movie. You know, even though I've always liked it, it's still not been in the forefront of my mind when I think of Kurosawa. You know, it's still Seven Samurai, Yojimbo,
sure,
you know, Kagemusha, all of those sort of movies. And this rewatch, I think, improved the movie so much for me. It was so much better this time than I remembered. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I watched this. This is my third time to see this movie. And I first got this on DVD when they re-released, like they had a different cover for it. They got done like doing a new cover for the DVD back when I bought this for the first time. And I always loved it. I thought this has always been one of my top 5 Kurosawas. I absolutely adore this movie. I think it's so good. Even though in retrospect, watching it a third time here when in my mid 30s, I realized like, oh God, I was like, even though I loved it, there was so much I wasn't getting when I watched it in my mid 20s, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely masterful. I think the first hour is great, but I don't look at the change in the plot or like, you know, once you get to the train and start following the police procedural element of it all, I don't think that is where the movie loses at all. I think that's where you start to see the other half.
Mm-hmm.
And you really start to get into the nitty gritty and the slums and you really start to see firsthand why this happened. What this is all about. And I would say the first half wouldn't be as good without the second half. You know, we spend so long up in a big room on the house on the hill where we learn all about what kind of man Gondo is, Mr. Gondo. You know, we learn the stakes for him and his ambitions within his company. And because all of that deliberate pacing, it's very exciting, I think, once we start the train sequence and then the search. Mm-hmm. And all that doesn't start, like I said, until like well over an hour. And it makes us invested in the relationships. It also makes us understand why the police feel this obligation to help Mr. Gondo once the kid is found. And I think that's one of the most interesting elements of the movie to me, is the police honor element of it all. Because you even see the cops say on the train, I hated this guy at first. I despised him.
Mm-hmm.
But what he's doing now is so honorable and good that now we feel obligated to hold up our end and work and bust our asses off to make sure he gets his money back, or to make sure we solve the case, you know, and we don't just say, all right, the kid was found, we're done, you know? And what's so interesting about that is there's a character, I believe it's the kidnapper on the phone, who comments like, oh, it's like 105 degrees down here. It's horrible. It's like hell. And you're sitting up there in that air conditioning, you know? And then you'll have the cops walking, and they're once the search begins for everything, you see them walking past this river that's got a bunch of trash in it. And it's polluted and disgusting and dirty. And they're like, look, they're searching all the different payphones that have a good vantage point into Toshiro Mifune, Mr. Gonda's living room of the house on the hill, you know? And they say, like, God, that house is obnoxious. It looks down on you and it makes you feel crappy. And then you see the police in the police station, and they don't have air conditioning either. They have little fans and windows open, and they're just like fanning themselves with paper, and they're sweating. And they're all doing it to try and recover millions of dollars for this guy on the hill. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that without that first hour and seeing the struggles of Mr. Gondo deciding, do I give up this thing? Which, by the way, I don't get the impression Mr. Gondo was born into luxury. He married into it, and he's been working his ass off to try and make his life better. You know?
Yeah, somebody says something that it was, you built your fortune off of the dowry that you got from marrying your wife,
right?
From her family,
right. And so they kind of understand how hard it would be for Mr. Gondo to give up this money, but since he does it, all of a sudden, like they feel honored to hold up their end in a way that I don't know that they would have had we not spent that first hour with Mr. Gondo agonizing over whether or not he's going to give away all his like riches and his fortune and sacrifice his position within the company and destroy himself professionally and financially to help out this guy that, like, yeah, it works for him, but it's like not his kid,
Yeah.
And I just think all of that is so masterful. The police, the people that are meant to solve this case have more in common with the kidnapper than they do with Mr. Gondo.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I think it's great. I think this movie is wonderful.
Yeah. I do think that it took me a while to get on his side.
Mr. Gondo?
Mr. Gondo, yeah. Because when it happens and he thinks it's his kid, he's like, get the checkbook. Like, I don't care how much it costs.
Sure.
I will pay whatever he wants. And then he realizes it's the wrong person. He's like, well, actually, I don't know if I can afford to pay what he wants. And just the fact that, like, he went from, I don't care, I'll pay whatever. And as soon as he found out it was like his chauffeur's son, he wasn't not conflicted, but he was suddenly a bit more willing to consider his options.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, for that reason, I don't know that I shared this sentiment later in the movie of the public and the people, respecting him so much or whatever, or finding this new, like, oh, poor guy, I can't believe he's doing this. And I maybe because of that, I spent a lot of the second half of the movie thinking about the chauffeur.
Yeah.
And how he is not in the headlines at all. And nobody seems to really care about what he went through.
Right.
Which was definitely an element that I didn't pick up on or even like really consider. I think as a young person watching this movie, it was this cool crime story, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I picked up on any of like the class stuff or any of this sort of nuance of Toshiro Mifune's character of Mr. Gondo.
Well, sure. Yeah, I agree. So there's this, this element, like you said, the public, once Mr. Gondo gives up his money, the cops who despised him, the people down below who despised him, all like are majorly sympathetic towards him. And I think that is a commentary in and of itself, because here's the thing. I think we understand through human nature that people don't give away their money. They just don't do that. It just doesn't happen unless there's like a write-off, involved or something to benefit them in the long run. Most people aren't going to give up their large sum of money and financially ruin themselves and get themselves fired for someone else. And I think what makes Mr. Gondo so rare is that he does do that. He debates about it for a long time, but he ultimately does. And then that's whenever everyone starts to respect him, because even though they hated him at the beginning because he's rich, now they like him because he did like what most humans should do, but we all understand that they never do.
Right.
So it's almost like he's like achieved like a level of honor that poor people can't even achieve because no one's ransoming their kids, So it's kind of fascinating how like the society all of a sudden feels obligated to stick up for him. And all he really did was like the right thing.
Yeah, which I guess is it's so rare that you become the hero when you do the right thing.
Right, exactly. It's like no one actually expected him to do it. And now that he actually did the right thing, people like, now all of a sudden they feel like responsible. The police are like, well, I mean, we've got we've got to, work double time because like he's honorable. Like who would have thought, like what in the world? So I think that's kind of interesting as well.
Yeah. I did not consider it from their perspective as much. So
I didn't the first couple times, but this time I couldn't help it because like their commentary, like all these cops are just, they live in the slums too. They don't seem to be they're not better off than the kidnapper. It doesn't seem like.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
no, I don't think so.
Another thing I think is absolutely wonderful about this movie is the sense of space and geography.
Yeah.
The idea of vantage points and where down in the slums you can see into the house. That you get a really clear element from like when you're looking down at the valley from the window, you can kind of see where, okay, I wonder where he's at and all these buildings down there, and the cops, going from payphone to payphone, trying to find a vantage point that would make sense from the conversation they all heard earlier. And the idea that whenever he's like, why are the windows closed? The cops have to like lay on the ground to not be seen. I just think that Kurosawa's work, like his idea that people understand the concept of a vantage point and geography of within the scene and in the movie. And he sets it up and films it and photographs it in a way to where you're never confused. There's a scene where the detectives are out looking and the driver, the chauffeur and his son are also out looking because the chauffeur feels such an obligation for his son to remember something to help, like, do you remember this tunnel? Do you remember this area? What's going on? Mm-hmm. And you could see that the detectives and the chauffeur and his son are both converging on the same area. And they're about to overlap one another. And you're like, oh, are they about to miss each other? And the detectives, like the chauffeur gets out and starts walking with his son. And then the chauffeur start going down this hill. And as soon as they turn right, they're going to see the chauffeur and his son in the car. And they do.
Right.
And just the idea that never in my brain was I like, where is everyone? What's going on here? I knew exactly what was going to be seen as soon as they turned the corner because it was set up so well. You know what I'm talking about? Which scene I'm talking about?
Yeah, because there's the shot in the car looking through the windshield when it turns the corner.
Yep.
And we see them. Yeah.
And you knew, like, I was like, oh, we're seeing through the windshield. This is exactly that little ramp we saw in the background. Like, I don't know. I just think Kurosawa, I think the way he really like focused down on perspective and vantage points and made it part of the plot was almost genius. Like, the idea that like the son, like the son who was rescued, they were like, draw a picture of what you could see from the window. And he draws the sunset and a mountain, like Mount Fuji.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, now our clue is where can we go in the city where we can see a vantage point kind of like this?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just think it's like you don't see that in movies these days in a way. Like, I mean, you do kind of, but this just feels very advanced for the era.
Yeah. Like, well, so much of it relies on like their clues are, well, it's a payphone that he could see into the house from with a regular telescope. So we have to look in this radius at all the telephones but then also like the distance with which you could see into the house with a regular telescope.
Right. And
that's fun.
Yeah, like all this detective work in the days before the internet and the days before cell phones and
Google Maps.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, it's just an old school, really smartly made like crime thriller in the second half. And I just think it's so masterful.
Yeah. Well, even the island, when they're trying to find the kid's viewpoint that he drew, they look at it and they're like, oh, well, that's I can't remember if they think it's an island and then they think it's part of the land or whatever. And then from like, when they find the viewpoint, they're like, oh, well, it looks like an island from this viewpoint or something like that.
Yeah, right.
And it's not. So even geography is sort of deceptive.
Mm-hmm. And your vantage point could also be limiting on what you think you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And in a movie called High and Low, it's almost like your vantage point is everything. Is like your truth, you know? Because, you know, it is so much very literal, like the house on the hill looking down on everyone and the house being looked up upon from down below. Anyway, the sense of geography in space, I think, is just really, really, really thought out and awesome. Let me ask you this. The pink smoke.
Yes.
Does that work for you? Is it impactful? Is it too much? Where do you come down on the pink smoke?
It's unnecessary.
Yeah.
Probably. Because, yeah, I mean, you could just say, look, pink smoke. And he points and we go, okay, yeah. We got it. It's interesting, I think. Like,
yeah.
It's hard to say if it's impactful.
Do you think it detracts?
What's that?
Do you think it detracts anything from the movie?
It's not a perfect effect.
No, it's very crude.
Yeah. So in some ways it's a little distracting. I understand why they would do it. Because it is important. It's kind of... They're a bit at a loss prior to that, right? They basically have nothing.
They've got a lot, but they hit a dead end. Because
this is after the people, they find the people dead, right?
Right, and then something, the kidnapper sees something on the news about the bags, and he's like, I gotta get rid of these bags.
Yeah. Well, it's like, it's kind of the point of the movie where things turn to, okay, now they're really closing in, and they're gonna catch him. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, see, I think that's where the pink smoke works, is because it gives you this jolt of energy all of a sudden to where it almost seems like the momentum, it's like, all right, here it begins now. Like we're going to start, a corner has been turned.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer my own question, I don't know. I don't think it detracts necessarily. I agree it's not a perfect effect, but it's something I've always remembered about this movie.
Yeah.
Like when I think of High and Low, I think of Toshiro Mifune on the phone, the pink smoke, and the kidnapper being followed by, like, it seems like 40 cops at any given time. Yeah. They're like, it's so crazy. The amount of money and wages, like, spent on this one case is insane. Because instead of being tailed by, like, 2 or 3 really skilled detectives, it's like they're in groups of 3 or 4 or 5 sometimes. Yeah. And they're like, someone go into the flower shop. And they're like, okay, we got it. And like this one team of 5 people will just like walk in or whatever.
Yeah. And there's some that are on standby that aren't even following him just in case they need to switch people.
Yeah. And it's like, logistically speaking, this is insane.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the power that money gets you, I guess. You know, sure. Not that he's paying for them, but the amount of money that he was able to pay.
Yeah, they're still working for a higher class client, you know, dude, than like one of their fellow blue collar people.
Would they do this for someone, you know, in the more slum part of town?
Or like, would they have done this at all?
The kidnapper had a son.
Yeah, or would they have done this at all if Mr. Gondo hadn't done what humans never do and paid $30 million or yen for someone else's kid to live?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. I think that's the thing that I remembered from the first time was this sort of complex struggle of it's not his kid, but he has to give them the money. And I remembered that being a bigger part of the movie.
Yeah, that's just the hook. Yeah.
It is the hook. And I think I was surprised by once that decision was made. I was like, there's an hour and a half left in this movie, I think. Mm-hmm. Where do we go from here? Because I mean, I remember, but like, I just remembered that sort of choice sticking in my head, you know, like that was the thing that at the time I was like, oh my gosh, like what a crazy choice, what a crazy situation to end up in. And I completely missed so much.
Yeah, you were done looking after the hook. You were like, I get the movie.
I was hooked and
I've solved the movie an hour in.
Yeah. How do you feel about seeing the... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go on.
How do you feel about seeing the kidnapper and the time that we spend with him, and I guess the time in the movie where we see who it is?
I mean, I like it. I don't think the movie is necessarily like... Before we get there and before we see his face and all that stuff, I don't know that I was necessarily like, who's the kidnapper going to be? You know, I didn't have any theories or predictions. I wasn't like, is it going to be one of the men from the meeting at the beginning of the movie and one of his business associates? You know, I wasn't thinking that. So when we see him, I was just like, okay, here's our kidnapper. Now we're going to get a different point of view on the thing. And to answer that question, I liked it. I think it's actually really interesting. And some of the scenes where he's walking around are some of the best filmed of the whole movie. Yeah. There are some scenes where the kidnapper has sunglasses on his face and he'll be in the shadows, but you still see the reflections in his lenses that are kind of like lit up and bright. So you still see his eyes even whenever he's not lit up. Or you still see like the shades of the lenses. And it felt very like Sin City, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's cool too. I think, you know, if the kidnapper is not going to be someone that was already established, we kind of have to introduce them somewhere. You know what I mean?
Like Kevin Spacey in Seven. It's like, it doesn't really do... Like at a certain point in the movie, it sort of detracts from not seeing the kidnapper.
Yeah. So
like, it's distracting, and it detracts from the overall quality of the movie and the storytelling if you don't get that point of view.
Yeah,
that's what I mean.
If it's just someone we've never seen before, I guess that's not as fun. It's not as satisfying.
Yeah, you're like, oh, it was a guy.
Yeah, it was someone I couldn't possibly have known that it was them. I couldn't have figured this out.
Right.
But it does take away like the mystery, because I do think that part of... Because I was thinking in the earlier part of the movie when we were just in the apartment of, is this one of the people that's doing this in order to stop his play, you know, because they want to take over the company or out him.
Right. That crossed my brain too.
Yeah. So there was a more mystery early on. And then that once we get the scene with the kidnapper, I think the first scene is him in his apartment.
Yeah. And he's looking out the window.
Yeah. And once we see that, it's like, well, that just cuts off, and then it becomes a very different thing. And I do like that perspective shift as well. Once we leave the house, we're kind of out of the house.
And we go back every now and then, and Mr. Gondo will be like mowing his lawn or something. But
yeah.
But
we're not completely,
which makes him seem a little bit more blue collary, I guess, because he can no longer afford someone to mow his lawn for him.
Yeah. And I don't know how much the movie wants me to sympathize against Mr. Gondo, because as we spend more time outside of that world and with those scenes of the police walking and looking up and like, you know, the house is kind of ugly. Like, I started to gain, I guess, a more empathetic understanding of why he was targeted. And,
for sure.
Not like glad that it happened or anything quite that extreme, but it became more gray once we shift perspectives and start spending time with like the kidnapper and with the, you know, like you said, the sweaty cops and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's very intentional. And I think that's why this movie does fit. Like, it'd be a great double feature with something like Parasite, you know?
Mm-hmm.
There's also, like, I just want to say, like, you said this movie feels very modern. Or I think you did at the beginning of the thing. Yeah, it feels very modern. It's very, like, well told, very well shot. There's one handheld shot in this that felt extremely modern. And I was like, I've forgotten about this shot, and I can't believe that it exists, because it's so brief and so cool. But it's the scene whenever the kidnapper just gets done leaving after giving that lady like the really strong heroin.
Yeah.
And the cops are like, we got to get up there now. She's going to die. And there's a handheld shot of like following them up the stairs and then turning to the left real fast. And then you just see like the dead body on the ground, and it's too late, and she's already OD'd because she's like, you know, there's stuff coming out of her mouth and her nose.
Yeah.
And just that handheld shot is so perfect and so good and so modern feeling. And it's so like different from anything else in the movie, where I was just like, the dude could do anything. Akira Kurosawa just got it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, some people just get what to do with the camera.
Yeah. And I think it's different from most stuff that I remember in Kurosawa. I'm sure that he has other handheld shots in his work, but
yeah, but that's the one that comes to mind like now, like when I think of handheld shots, like I'm looking back and I'm like, I could think of maybe a couple shots here and there that were handheld throughout movies that I've seen, but this to me just felt like a really masterful example of switching to handheld really quick for this one little scene and it not feeling distracting, but instead giving it this really raw energy of like the panic and the rush of them trying to get up the stairs before she dies, and it just being too late. And like, it's just that handheld brings out the emotion of the scene in a way that would have felt a lot slower and more static had it not been handled in a different way.
It's so seamless that I had to acknowledge that it was handheld and examine the shot. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of looked at the edges of the frame of like, is this like a smooth dolly that's just a little bumpy? And I kind of had to look and acknowledge that it's handheld because it was so surprising and didn't feel like handheld.
No.
Noticed.
And anyway, I think it's great. I'm almost tapped out. Do you want to talk about anything specifically that we haven't touched on yet?
Did you have any thoughts on the score or the musical pieces? Like, there's not much of a score, to be honest. It's
not as bombastic as something like Yojimbo.
Yeah, there's a couple of sections where like the score just kind of comes in and then it leaves, and one of them is relatively insignificant. I wish I could remember the exact scene, but it's just, I think it's why the police are just kind of walking around doing stuff. There's just this sort of like bouncy little, you know, orchestra piece that plays, and it
a little bop.
Yeah. And there's other scenes in the movie where characters are walking around doing stuff, and then we don't have that. So I don't know. It seemed pretty sporadic and random.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I don't have a lot of thoughts on the score, but I do agree that it does seem sparse and for most of the movie.
Yeah.
What I did notice about the sound was the city noises. There are multiple times whenever Mr. Gondo opens his door or his window, and all of a sudden you just hear the sounds of the city in the background.
Yeah. And then it's stark whenever when he closes them. He opens it at one point to kind of look out, and it might have been when he was like, I wonder where they are or whatever. And then when he closes it, the sound design is like, we don't even hear the murmur through the glass anymore.
Yeah. It's like he just lives in this like immune place, immune from the dirtiness of the city.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think my only point with the score, some ways I feel like when it popped up, it didn't feel necessary.
Yeah, as I'm thinking back on the movie, it almost feels like I don't remember a score at all.
Yeah, score is probably the wrong word, because it is just like a few, and I literally mean a few. I think about 3 random places where non-diegetic music pops up. And I almost wish that it hadn't. And if I'm going to be critical of the movie at all, I think it would have been better with just none of that. No music that wasn't, diegetic somehow coming from somewhere in the scene.
I think I agree with that. I think it is more powerful whenever you let the city become a character of its own with its own kind of noises and sounds. And like, it's one thing if like the kidnapper's going into a bar and there's music playing.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. But I want to hear and see the city as these people do every day, walking around it. I don't want artificial, music coming in and telling me how to feel, because this movie is all about the gray. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to sympathize with Mr. Gondo if I'm not, being told to, or maybe I do. I think it's more interesting to just tell the movie, tell the story, let the city sounds and the Foley and everything all feel natural. And you're right. It'd probably be a better film altogether that way. That being said, the score as it is doesn't distract me because I'm having a hard time remembering it at all.
Yeah.
So
it's minor. It's nitpicky.
For sure. Well, we are here to critique the movie,
Yeah. Did you want to talk about the ending at all before we go?
Where he goes to jail and sees him in jail?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If there's anything that you took away from that, or anything that it left you with?
I think what I took from the scene this last time is that I feel bad for the kidnapper, because I don't think the kidnapper anticipated Mr. Gondo being as honorable as he was.
Yeah.
And I also feel like he's had a rough go of it, the kidnapper, because this is where he says something to the effect of, like, I'm glad my mother's dead so she didn't have to see this, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And then you get to start thinking, like, well, what is this guy's life like? Like, what kind of hardships has he endured?
Mm-hmm.
And does he really deserve to die? Would he have hurt the kid? I don't know. Those are all different questions, I guess. But I do love the shot where he freaks out and stands up, and then the little metal wall comes down in front of Mr. Gondo, and it's just sort of this somber, like, who gained what from this whole thing,
Yeah. The metal thing closing is kind of what struck me, and I didn't necessarily think about this at the time, but as we're talking about it, it sort of parallels with the window closing and shutting out the sound of the city for me.
Yeah, shut out the pain so you don't see it.
Of like, well, it's, there's that barrier. It's done. You don't see him anymore.
Yeah.
You don't got to deal
with
this.
No longer have to witness this human suffering.
Yeah.
There's a barrier that protects me.
But I did like the guy's performance, the kidnapper's performance, and just the scenes of like you think I'm shaking because I'm scared or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not. But that,
it was almost like
interesting.
That was almost like the only victory he had left is just like invite Mr. Gondo there and then gloat about how he's not affected by any of this.
Yeah.
Cool. Which seems like a lie.
It did. I think that was what's interesting about it, about the performance, and just watching the scene of like, is he
Mr.
gonna
Gondo be like, yeah, no, I can see you. You're totally not scared. Yeah.
Sure, man.
Yeah.
If you say so.
Justin, what did you rate this movie before, and what do you rate it now out of 5?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I rated it before. I think it was really early on when I was really getting into movies, and to me, it was like, it was a Kurosawa movie, so I better love it.
Yeah. I don't want to be dumb.
Yeah. So I think if I'm being honest, my feelings of it were probably in like the 4 out of 5 range the first time. Mm-hmm. Like genuine feelings, despite what I said outwardly. And I definitely think I'm more in the 4.5 to 5. Like, I really can't think of anything wrong with the movie or anything that I have to be like too critical of that really detracts in any ways. It's just like, my main kind of perfect.
My main complaints, and they're not even really complaints, but just things where I'm like, was it necessary? Like, is the movie better with this? Would be, I'm still unsure of the pink smoke, despite the fact that it lives like rent-free in my brain and I've never forgotten it.
Mm-hmm.
And now that you kind of bring it up, maybe like the sound design could have been a little bit more creative to avoid awkward music cues. But since I didn't notice them at the time, I have a hard time really counting that as a true criticism.
and to be fair, Kurosawa in general, I don't ever remember any films of his that are kind of ridden with score throughout constantly or, regularly. Like I do remember the music in his movie being sporadic, or in his work being sporadic and just kind of, here it is briefly, and then we'll go, and not constantly telling us. There is a lot of ambient sound that I recall anyways. So it's a bit of his style. I'm just questioning whether or not it's quite the right choice for this movie, but it's not really the wrong choice either, because it's pretty perfect.
Yeah, I am sad that Chris was not here to review this with us.
Yeah, I'm assuming he hates it and thinks Kurosawa sucks.
Yeah, probably. That sounds like Chris.
Well, maybe next episode we'll let him just chime in at the end.
Yeah, and be like, give us a full review of the movie right now.
Yeah, 30 minutes. Go
of this other episode.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All
so
right,
you ready to move on?
I believe we are. I believe we're done with this part of the show.
Awesome. So we'll move into the poll to choose our next Criterion film. And do you want to tell people the theme? There's not a big one this week, but go ahead and tell them anyways.
Sure. Yeah. Normally we like to pick a theme, Halloween, scary, whatever, Valentine's Day, like whatever. I don't know what some of our past themes have been, but since Chris isn't here and we need a poll anyway, I think we are just going to choose blind spots, things we have not seen and we want to see. So that way we can actually get some new movies watched.
Yeah.
So without further ado, Justin, what is your movie that you would like to put forward to the listeners to be able to vote on?
Yeah. I was down to 2, and when we have this theme, just for the record, what I do is I pull up the Criterion Collection on Letterboxd, like a list that's the full thing, and then I sort by most popular, and then tend to choose out of like the first 2 or 3 films that I haven't seen, so that I kind of hit maybe like the biggest movie that is a blind spot for me that's on Criterion.
Smart.
So looking at the first couple that were on that list, one of them is black and white, and since we just did high and low, I feel like watching something in color.
All right.
So I'm choosing blue as the warmest color.
Oh, have you never seen this?
I have not.
All right.
So obviously it's been on my radar since it came out, because it made a splash and had a reputation when it came out. And of course, Lea Seydoux has been in a ton of things, and she's always great to me. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. If it wins.
Interesting. Okay. I bet I don't know. We'll see, because my blind spot is a film that I have started to watch more than once, and I just never made it through. Not for any reason like I didn't enjoy it or wasn't good or whatever. I just haven't got a chance to finish this movie, and I still don't even know what it's about. And this is a Gus Van Sant film called My Own Private Idaho.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I've not
Have you seen this
either.
movie?
No. It'd be new for me.
Okay, cool.
And that's awesome. That's one I've been wanting to see forever. I actually saw something, it might have been a Criterion post recently, something from it that was really intriguing, and I was like, damn it, I need to watch that movie. So
yeah, I thought about this because I don't know if you've been on the internet, but like, I guess Matthew Perry's like releasing some sort of like memoir or book or something. And he was recently talking about and kind of dissing Keanu Reeves and like praising River Phoenix. I don't know. Matthew Perry's stupid. But the point is, it made me remember My Own Private Idaho whenever I was going through the Criterion list and being like, what do I want to watch?
Okay. Well, there you go. That's as good a reason as any.
Yeah. Yep.
The other one that I was, just for reference, the black and white film was, I don't know if I'm saying it right, Lahaine.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's got Vincent Cassel in it. It's black and white, like there's a lot of crime in it and stuff, but it seems so similar to High and Low in some ways.
Guess we don't know, because we're not going to watch it, though.
Yeah, we won't at this point.
That's a blind spot
I had
for
to
me,
change
too.
it up a bit.
Yeah. We should have gotten Chris to text us in a blind spot just to round it out to 3, but that's okay. 2 will work.
No, and I want to put one in for Chris. Can I?
Okay, put one in for Chris.
Yeah, because I know he hasn't seen this movie, or at least last I checked, which wasn't that long ago, he had not seen it yet. And I think he's chosen it as a blind spot before, and it's definitely been on other polls, and it never won. But it was always like, Chris is finally going to see the movie, but I'm making him choose Tree of Life.
I thought you were joking at the beginning when we started this thing, but you were serious.
I was so serious, but and it gives us, like you said, it gives the poll 3 choices instead of just 2.
Well, and it also gives you 2 choices, and it gives you a chance to choose one that's not a blind spot for you at all, and just a movie you want to watch.
True. I did just watch it recently, but I could always watch it again.
Yeah, it'd give me a chance to watch it again because I haven't seen it in, I don't know, like 10 years. Maybe it's time. Maybe it's due.
It is. It's never won a poll. I think it's been on like 3 polls and it's never won. So its track record is not good.
We should put it up against the Thin Red Line if it loses this time. Next time we'll just do Terrence Malick that way.
Yes, let's do that.
All right. Anyways, are we done?
Yep. That's it. Thank you, listener, so much for listening. And of course, as always, thanks Jake Wagner-Russell for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of it, you can go to soundcloud.com/bopscotch. That's
right. Stay tuned to this channel, this feed, subscribe, all that stuff, whatever you want to call it, because our next episode will be over a little horror film that is making a big splash called Barbarian, which I actually just watched, so I have plenty of time to mull it over in my brain.
Yeah, and I'll watch it sometime around the Halloween weekend, which is the perfect time to do it. So
yeah, which is like soon.
Yeah, it's this weekend coming up as we're recording this anyways.
Yep.
But all right, I'll talk to you then.
All right, see ya.